In the brutal history of the UFC Heavyweight Division, very few names command real respect without relying on hype, trash talk, or manufactured controversy. Stipe Miocic is one of them. Born in 1982, raised in Cleveland, Ohio, and known to the world not only as a fighter, but as a full-time firefighter and paramedic, Miocic represents a rare contradiction in modern combat sports. He is statistically the most accomplished heavyweight champion in UFC history, holding the record for most successful heavyweight title defenses. Yet, he has never been treated like the face of the division. No endless media push, no protection, no superstar privileges, just constant pressure to prove again and again that he belongs at the top. On paper, Stipe Miocic defeated legends like Fabricio Werdum, Junior Dos Santos, and Daniel Cormier, cementing a resume that should place him far above most heavyweights of his era. But behind the numbers lies a deeper question that the UFC has never been comfortable answering. Why does the greatest heavyweight champion still feel replaceable? Why did contract disputes, public criticism, and promotional silence follow him even at his peak? And why did the organization seem more eager to move past him than to build around him? This is not a story about chaos or criminal scandal. This is a story about power, control, and what happens when a champion refuses to fit the entertainment mold. To understand why Stipe Miocic became both indispensable and inconvenient to the UFC, the story must begin long before championship belts, back in the working-class world that shaped the most unlikely heavyweight king the sport has ever seen. Long before championship belts and sold-out arenas, Stipe Miocic came from a world far removed from the spotlight of professional fighting. Born in 1982 and raised in Euclid, Ohio, a working-class suburb of Cleveland, Miocic grew up in a family shaped by Croatian immigrant roots, discipline, and quiet resilience. There was no early path toward fame, no push toward celebrity athletics. Instead, his environment emphasized hard work, humility, and responsibility values that would later define his entire career. At Eastlake North High School, and later at Cleveland State University, Miocic built his foundation not in spectacle, but in substance, competing in wrestling and developing the kind of physical endurance rarely associated with heavyweight fighters. Unlike many future champions, Stipe Miocic did not enter mixed martial arts as a prodigy groomed for dominance. He transitioned into MMA relatively late, bringing with him a rare blend of wrestling fundamentals, boxing discipline, and an analytical approach to combat. When he arrived in the UFC in 2011, he was not marketed as a future champion, but his performances quickly forced attention. Victories over Mark Hunt, Roy Nelson, and Gabriel Gonzaga revealed a heavyweight who moved faster, thought sharper, and conserved energy more efficiently than his peers. Analysts began to notice something unusual: a heavyweight with cardio, fight IQ, and technical patience. The turning point came at UFC 198 inches 2016, when Stipe Miocic faced reigning champion Fabricio Werdum in Curitiba, Brazil. Against expectations and surrounded by a hostile crowd, Miocic delivered a precise knockout, capturing the UFC Heavyweight Championship in one of the most decisive title wins in division history. That moment reshaped the heavyweight landscape. Over the next several years, Miocic defended his title against elite challengers, breaking records and redefining what consistency meant at heavyweight. With each defense, he quietly built a legacy no other heavyweight had achieved. Yet, even as his dominance became undeniable, a tension began to form beneath the surface. For all his victories, Stipe Miocic never became the promotional centerpiece many expected, and as his rise reached its peak, a harsher reality emerged, one where greatness alone would not guarantee security. That tension would soon define the most controversial chapters of his career. For Stipe Miocic, controversy did not arrive in the form of arrests, reckless behavior, or public scandals. Instead, it emerged through a quieter and far more unsettling conflict, one between a dominant champion and the system meant to reward him. As Miocic continued to defend the UFC Heavyweight Championship, questions began to surface not about his skill, but about how he was being treated behind the scenes. Despite holding the record for most successful heavyweight title defenses, Miocic repeatedly voiced concerns about being underpaid and undervalued, a rare move for a reigning champion who was expected to remain silent and compliant. The tension became impossible to ignore following his victories over Junior dos Santos and Francis Ngannou, where Miocic's performances showcased not just power, but tactical superiority. Yet instead of promotional momentum, he faced stalled negotiations and delayed title defenses. Public statements from Miocic revealed frustration with contract terms, pay structure, and a perceived lack of respect from the UFC. In an organization built on leverage and control, a champion openly questioning financial treatment was already a problem, but things escalated further with the arrival of Daniel Cormier. At UFC 226, Miocic faced Daniel Cormier in a super fight that carried massive promotional weight. The bout ended abruptly, with Miocic losing his title, followed by intense debate surrounding eye poke allegations and officiating decisions. While controversies in MMA are nothing new, the aftermath was telling. Media narratives rapidly shifted in favor of Cormier, while Miocic's grievances were largely dismissed. Requests for an immediate rematch were delayed, and when the trilogy finally materialized, Miocic entered under circumstances that many analysts described as structurally disadvantageous. The deeper issue was not a single fight or a disputed moment. It was the pattern. Each controversy revealed how quickly a historically dominant champion could be repositioned as expendable. Miocic was expected to defend endlessly, accept unfavorable terms, and remain quiet, yet he did none of those things. His refusal to conform quietly turned him into an awkward figure within the promotional hierarchy. He was reliable, respected by peers, and admired by hardcore fans, but he was not easily controlled. What made these controversies especially damaging was how subtly they reshaped public perception. Without a loud persona or media theatrics, Stipe Miocic struggled to counter narratives that minimized his achievements. His legacy was being debated not on merit, but on convenience. And as the disputes continued, it became clear that the conflict was no longer just about championships. It was about money, leverage, and who truly held power within the sport. Because behind every controversy surrounding Stipe Miocic, there was a far more dangerous variable for the UFC to manage: the financial reality of a champion who knew his value and refused to be easily replaced. In the world of the UFC, championships create prestige, but money determines power. This is where the story of Stipe Miocic becomes especially uncomfortable for the organization. Despite being the most successful heavyweight champion in UFC history, Miocic was never compensated like an irreplaceable asset. Reports surrounding his fight purses consistently showed numbers far below those of more marketable stars, even when they lacked titles or long-term dominance. While exact figures varied, industry insiders repeatedly noted that Miocic's base pay and PPV share lagged behind fighters who generated noise rather than legacy. This imbalance exposed a deeper truth about how the UFC values fighters. Stipe Miocic generated credibility, not chaos. His fights stabilized the heavyweight division, offering consistency in a weight class notorious for volatility. Yet stability, in the UFC's business model, does not always translate into leverage. Fighters like Brock Lesnar, with fewer appearances and no sustained title reign, earned dramatically higher paydays due to crossover appeal and spectacle. Miocic, by contrast, delivered elite performances without threatening the promotional narrative, making him financially easier to suppress. What further complicated matters was Miocic's unique independence. Unlike most champions, Stipe Miocic maintained a full-time career as a firefighter and paramedic in Ohio, even while holding the UFC's most dangerous belt. This single fact stripped the organization of its greatest weapon: total dependency. He did not rely on sponsorship circuits, Hollywood exposure, or UFC-controlled branding opportunities to define his identity. If negotiations stalled, Miocic could walk away without financial collapse, a scenario that quietly terrified a promotion built on asymmetrical power. This independence shifted the balance of control. From the UFC's perspective, Miocic was a champion who could not be pressured easily, threatened with inactivity, or molded into a media figurehead. His value lay in legitimacy rather than optics. which made him essential to the division but difficult to exploit. The paradox was clear. Stipe Miocic was too important to lose, yet too autonomous to dominate. As negotiations dragged on and public comments surfaced about pay and respect, Miocic's presence became a silent challenge to the UFC's labor structure. He did not protest loudly, but his existence raised an uncomfortable question for every fighter watching. If the greatest heavyweight champion can be underpaid, what does that mean for everyone else? That question carried far more weight than any knockout. And while money defined the power struggle between Miocic and the UFC, it was his life outside the octagon, the part the organization could never own, that truly sealed his status as a problem they could not fully solve. Away from the lights of the octagon, Stipe Miocic lived a life that stood in sharp contrast to the image the UFC prefers to sell. While many champions embrace luxury, constant media exposure, and carefully curated public personas, Miocic remained grounded in Ohio, committed to a routine defined by family, community, and service. Even at the height of his championship reign, he continued working as a firefighter and paramedic, responding to emergencies while holding the most dangerous title in mixed martial arts. This was not a publicity stunt. It was a reflection of how he saw himself, not as a celebrity, but as a working professional. That choice shaped how the UFC viewed him. In an industry driven by narratives and spectacle, Stipe Miocic offered neither controversy nor excess. He avoided public feuds, rarely engaged in promotional theatrics, and spoke plainly about his priorities. To hardcore fans, this authenticity was refreshing. To the organization, it was limiting. He could not be easily molded into a global brand ambassador, nor could his private life be leveraged to generate storylines. His restraint became a liability in a system that thrives on constant attention. The psychological weight of this dual life was significant. Balancing the responsibility of public safety with the pressure of defending a world title placed Miocic under a level of stress few champions ever experienced. Losses were not just professional setbacks, they were public judgments questioning his value, his pay, and even his relevance. Yet, he absorbed that pressure quietly, refusing to reshape himself for acceptance. That silence, however, allowed narratives to form without his voice guiding them. Inside the sport, peers respected him deeply. Fighters understood the rarity of a heavyweight champion who trained relentlessly, avoided excess, and returned home to an ordinary life. But respect from within did not guarantee protection from above. Stipe Miocic remained vulnerable to unfavorable matchmaking, delayed opportunities, and shifting promotional priorities. His refusal to chase fame left him exposed to a system that rewarded visibility over virtue. This distance from the spotlight also amplified the consequences of earlier conflicts. When controversies emerged, Miocic lacked the media machinery to counterbalance them. His measured personality made him easy to overlook when new stars emerged, even as his achievements remained unmatched. And in a sport built on momentum, invisibility can be just as dangerous as defeat. Yet this same independence, the life the UFC could never own, was also the source of his enduring strength. Stipe Miocic did not need the organization to validate him, and that reality led to the most revealing truth of all. The UFC feared losing him, not because of what he represented on camera, but because of what he symbolized behind the scenes. To understand why the UFC could never fully afford to lose Stipe Miocic, it is necessary to look beyond pay-per-view numbers and promotional hype. In the UFC Heavyweight Division, chaos has always been the norm. Champions rise quickly, fall just as fast, and rarely maintain long-term dominance. Stipe Miocic disrupted that pattern. His reign introduced something the division had never possessed before: stability. Through repeated title defenses and elite-level performances, he became the benchmark against which every heavyweight contender was measured. This made Miocic uniquely valuable. Even without being a promotional superstar, his presence gave the heavyweight division legitimacy. Fighters who defeated him would instantly gain historical credibility. Fighters who lost to him were still considered elite. That kind of symbolic weight cannot be manufactured through marketing alone. It must be earned over time, and Stipe Miocic earned it through consistency, discipline, and resilience. The UFC also understood a harsher truth. There were no readily available replacements. Heavyweights with Miocic's blend of durability, technical boxing, wrestling defense, and cardio were extremely rare. Prospects came and went, but none replicated his ability to neutralize power punchers while maintaining composure under pressure. Without Miocic, the division risked returning to instability, short reigns, vacant titles, and fractured narratives that weakened fan investment. Yet Miocic's importance extended beyond competition. He represented a quiet challenge to the UFC's control structure, a champion who could walk away financially intact, who maintained a respected career outside fighting, and who refused to perform for attention undermined the organization's traditional leverage. His existence contradicted the idea that fighters must surrender identity to succeed. That contradiction made him dangerous not to opponents, but to the business model itself. This explains the UFC's conflicted behavior. They needed Stipe Miocic to legitimize the division, but they also needed to limit his influence. He could not be openly discarded, yet he could not be fully empowered. The result was a delicate balance. Delayed opportunities, minimal promotion, and transactional respect rather than celebration. Not protection, containment. And that leads to the most revealing question of all. Did the UFC protect Stipe Miocic because they valued him, or because they feared what the heavyweight division would become without him? The answer sits at the heart of his legacy, and it brings the story to its final, unresolved chapter. When the story of the UFC Heavyweight Division is told decades from now, Stipe Miocic will remain one of its greatest contradictions. On paper, he is the most accomplished heavyweight champion the organization has ever seen. A man who defended the belt more times than anyone before him and defeated an entire generation of elite contenders. Yet in practice, his career never followed the path typically reserved for legends. There were no farewell tours, no unquestioned loyalty from the organization, and no sustained effort to elevate him as the face of the sport. Miocic's legacy is not defined by spectacle, but by substance. He proved that dominance does not require theatrics, and that greatness can exist without surrendering identity. At the same time, his journey exposed uncomfortable truths about how power operates inside the UFC. Championships alone do not guarantee security. Loyalty is conditional, and even the greatest fighters can find themselves negotiating from a position of restraint rather than control. The most haunting question surrounding Stipe Miocic is not about wins or losses. It is about authorship. Who truly controlled his career? The UFC, with its contracts and promotional leverage? The public, with its shifting attention and expectations? Or Miocic himself, choosing independence over influence, service over spectacle, and integrity over conformity? The story of Stipe Miocic is not one of downfall, but of quiet resistance. And as the heavyweight division continues to evolve, his shadow remains. Because no matter who holds the belt next, they will always be compared to the champion who proved that true power in this sport does not always come from control, but from the refusal to be controlled. If you want, I can now create a viral title, thumbnail text, or image search keywords by section to package this video for maximum retention.